Okay, the stream is live. I've made Joe your co-host.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
Hey, Jeannie. You caught me chopping my mushrooms. Guess what we're going to talk about today?
I don't know if I can guess, Deb, but mushrooms?
Mushrooms, maybe some mushrooms. Boy, this is making a lot of noise, isn't it? Hey, Barbara, welcome back. Hey, Nelda.
Hi.
Hey, thanks for your note the other day. I loved your feedback. That was really nice to see. So I appreciate that. Hi, Marjorie. Marjorie, we had a good time in that Let's Talk Cooking. I really got a lot of good ideas from you. So I want you to know I'm working on those. So
Okay.
it took a while, but we're going to
Great.
focus on some of those things. I love the idea was, well, of course, the plant-based things. So that's really good. And then I was listening specifically to some things about arthritis and that sort of thing. So getting some ideas for classes that are food related around how to help manage
Okay.
arthritis. So I love that.
Oh, great. Looking forward to hearing.
So I want to welcome all of you. Is there anyone who is here that's here for the very first time with Get Set Up? Anyone?
I'm here.
You're new with Get Set Up, Chris.
Yes.
Well, welcome. We're really glad to have you. And we hope you enjoy this class and that you'll come back for many more. We are a friendly group, as I think you'll see here. Lots of folks come to these cooking classes and we've become a little bit of a community here. So I really enjoy when we can just chat together about cooking and about ideas. And I bring part of the puzzle, but you all bring the rest. So I just want to give a special welcome to you as a new person. Is there anybody else out there who's brand new to my classes? Anybody? We've all been here before. It's like crickets. That's kind of nice. I have a following. Wow. Okay, I'm going to share my screen so we can go ahead and get started. But first, I'm going to make sure I have my slides in the appropriate place. Gosh, I was making some final adjustments. You know how that goes. This is the first one of these classes, so there's always something that you want to change. All right. So what you should be seeing is a slide that says cream and blended soups. Do you see that? Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, great. Then we're on the right path. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Deb Livingston and I am your guide. I've been a guide with Get Set Up since almost the beginning. So I started teaching teachers how to use Google Classroom, but then kind of stumbled into the cooking stuff because I love to cook and I'm an organic gardener and I need to do something with all those things that come in my garden. So this was a natural thing and I'm enjoying sharing with you what I know and especially learning what you know about cooking. So it is a community effort and it's expanding all the time. So I have just become full-time with Get Set Up and I'm responsible for all things cooking. That doesn't mean me personally, but getting programming here that will help us all. So whenever you have ideas or suggestions, I'm all ears. And right now we have something called, well, we have a special email address where you can send those things to me. And I'm going to put those ideas or suggestions, I'm going to put that in the chat box right now. Maybe if I can find the chat box here. It's a little different than my regular address. It's Deb dash I hope I'm doing this right. The guide at getsetup.com. So what you can do is send ideas, you can send pictures, you can send stories. Like lots of you have come and said, oh, I made a particular recipe. And I try to remember all of that. And I've sent it to Liz a few times, our marketing person. But it's really great if you shoot me a note. That way I have it in writing and I don't forget about it. So pictures are great, stories are wonderful, ideas are terrific, anything like that. And so just a little bit about our format, especially for those of you who are new. We do learn from each other, and ideally we can see each other on camera and on microphone. So I encourage you to come on camera. I do understand when that's not always possible. I also like when you unmute yourself and go ahead and speak, because that's fun too. We just have a conversation. If you don't want to do either one of those, you can certainly use the chat. And Joe is here today. Hi, Joe. Joe is our technical support, here to help you with anything technical, but also to check the chat. So periodically, if there are things in the chat, I have asked Joe to go ahead and just kind of stop me, interrupt me, and say, hey, there's something here somebody wants to comment on or wants to make a suggestion about. So that's how we'll manage this. And we are on live stream today. And that means that there are people out there who might be watching this class that I want to say hi to. And I want to encourage you to come and register for one of our classes so that you can share your gems about cooking as well and participate with all of us. That would be fun. Lastly, Get Set Up isn't paid to promote any products or services that I might show you. So along the way, I might show you a product or introduce you to a website. There's no financial relationship there. So with those little disclaimers and housekeeping issues out of the way, let's get into our subject for today, which is cream soups and blended soups. So those of you who've come to some of my other classes in soups may know or remember that I said I started this whole idea about making soups with one class that I was going to cover everything. Boy, was I naive. And I ended up changing the first class to simply one that is soups from scratch, that teaches us how to make good, flavorful beginnings to a soup. Because I had one person come to a class who said, gee, I make soups all the time, but they always taste kind of bland. Why is that? So we start with that first session talking about how to lay a flavor foundation, how to make our own stocks and broths. And you might want to attend that class if you haven't already done so. I'll be using the homemade chicken stock that I made for one of these soups today. So we're going to talk about what is a cream soup, what is the difference between a cream soup and a pureed or a blended soup. We kind of use these terms a little bit interchangeably, and there's many different variations. We're just going to hit a few of them today. And then we're going to look at a specific cream soup recipe that I'm going to make. I made it last night. It was delicious. Everyone, my neighbor had it. My dad has it today. We ate it for dinner last night. I think you're going to like it. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the whole cream soup idea. Cream soup can be pureed, or it doesn't have to be pureed. So how many of you enjoy a particular kind of cream soup now that you get at a favorite restaurant or that you make? Linda, what do you make? Or what do you like? Can't hear you. Oh, there you go. Still can't hear you. Can you put it in the chat? Or, yeah, great. Okay.
I love clam chowder.
Clam chowder. So that's really a cream soup, but it's not a blended soup. It's really got chunks in it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and we actually did a class. Were you in the class on bean soups and chowders? You're on mute. You're on mute, Michelle.
I was in the class with cooking with beans, but not the bean and chowder class yet. I'll have to register for that.
Yes, so we do talk about a clam chowder there. So who else? So they're certainly cream, New England clam chowder, certainly cream based. Joyce, what about you? Go ahead, Joyce, unmute yourself.
I like squash soup. I
Squash.
puree my squash.
You puree your squash soup. Okay. And do you put any kind of milk or cream in that, or do you just puree the vegetables?
Well, sometimes I put like the sour cream in it. Sometimes I put half and half, something like that.
Yeah, and that you're pointing out something that I think is really important to say, because a few people have said, well, they can't come to maybe they can't make cream soups because they can't eat dairy. So there are so many different options. You can cream a soup without using any cream. You can use a substitute for cream, or you can use cream. So there's a variety of ways, and most of these soups, the soups that I'm showing you today, can all lend themselves to any of those variations, quite honestly. So it should be suitable for just about any kind of dietary or food style preference. Okay. Anyone else have a favorite?
This is Teresa. I like a leek and potato soup.
Okay. And when you do your leek and potato, when you make your leek and potato soup, what kind of seasonings do you make? We had someone in class yesterday who said, oh, I'm so disappointed in my leek and potato soup because it tasted so bland. So,
Gosh, I don't remember, but I know that I've never had bland at all.
You probably put some herbs in there.
I'm sure.
Because when you think about it, leeks and potatoes by themselves aren't that exciting. So maybe kicking it up with some thyme, margarine, marjoram, or those kind of herbs can be really helpful to make that more robust tasting soup.
And
So-
another is shrimp and corn chowder.
You make the shrimp and corn chowder, yeah.
Mhm.
And that's got cream in it.
Mhm.
Great, awesome. All right, so in the case of a cream soup, we can puree it, or we don't have to. And it's usually thickened with some kind of a roux or another kind of thickening agent. I was going to get into that, those other French terms, but we won't do that today, maybe another day. So you're going to use some kind of a roux. And now what is a roux? Somebody knows what a roux is here in this group. What's a roux?
It's a thickening agent, flour and butter mixed in and smooth.
Yeah, it's actually any kind of fat and flour mixed.
I used it with gumbo last night.
Okay, that's a good example. Yeah, it's a good thickener, and it is the base for a lot of cream soups. Today we're going to do a little bit of a shortcut on that. It's a roux, but in a slightly different way that you might see a shortcut taken in a lot of the soups that we make, and that is to sprinkle flour over the vegetables as you're sauteing them. You do some basic sauteing in fat, and then you sprinkle flour, and you end up kind of dissolving that flour into the vegetables and into the fat so that you don't get lumps. The big problem with flour in any kind of a soup is when you add it to broth and it forms little lumps. So we certainly don't need that. And then we are in a cream soup adding milk and or cream, but I put that in quotations because what kind of milk or cream substitutes could we use if we're dairy free or vegan? What do you use?
Almond milk, cashew milk.
Almond milk and cashew milk. Anybody use anything different? Those are two really good ones. I would throw out oat milk. I'd also throw out coconut milk if you want to change the flavor profile a little bit. You can get a little bit of a Thai or an Asian flavored soup just by using coconut milk and some different herbs. Okay. So let's take a look at this soup that I made last night. So I'm going to try something here. I'm going to try making this soup while I'm talking to you about some other soups. I'm going to be cooking this soup. So this could be comical. I'm not sure. So we're looking at cream of mushroom soup. And I have made a number of cream of mushroom soups, and I have blended them and folded some whole mushrooms into them. And I just was, they were okay. But it wasn't there. I hadn't really hit upon a recipe that I wanted to recreate until this one. So I really like this one, and it's probably going to come, it's going to make a place in my must keep recipe file. And it's cream of mushroom. I have 1.5 pounds of mushrooms here that I have already sliced so that you don't have to watch me doing that. Let me just tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start with 4 tablespoons of butter. And I'm going to put them into my stock pot over here on the stove, my soup pot. And along with that, I'm going to put in 1 tablespoon of olive oil, and I'm just going to melt that. And while that is melting on very low heat, so I don't inadvertently burn it, I'm going to show you my little garlic tools and my little mushroom tools. And now, how many of you actually measure your oils when you're making things, or do you just kind of go like this? You know, I'm doing the measuring spoon just for the purpose of the class, so we're putting 1 tablespoon in here. But honestly, I kind of learned to eyeball that. But if you're really looking to watch particular calories, then it's real good to measure everything out, because then you know that the nutritional profile that is on the recipe that you have is accurate. So if that's important to you, then do measure. And then what we're going to do is get ready to be able to add the garlic. So I showed yesterday's class my elephant garlic. And I really love it because it has these huge cloves and they're really easy to manage. But I also have regular hardneck garlic that I grow in my garden. And, you know, I want to be a little bit of a purist, so I do grow some of that. And the cloves can sometimes be kind of little like this. You've seen those when you buy that at the store. So they're for somebody who's as kind of shushly, we call it here in Pennsylvania, Dutch country, as shushly as I am, they take a while to do. So I have this little gadget. Have you ever had one of these? It's just a little rubber sleeve. And
Yes, it's cool.
it's very cool. When I put those into my garlic cloves into the end of this tube, and I shouldn't stuff it too full, and then I roll it. Naked garlic. Those little shells come right off. They're great. So this is a handy dandy little inexpensive gadget that will make quick work of taking the shells off of your garlic. And for those of you who attended my Soups from Scratch, where we talked about broth and stock, what do we do with these garlic shells and the ends off the garlic? Anybody?
Save them.
Stock.
Save them all for stock.
Okay, you got it. You got it. So that's what we're going to do. And I just wanted to show you that I do put my money where my mouth is. So I almost got the bag of shrimp out. This is my very unglamorous looking scrap bag. I just keep adding to. So I'm going to add my garlic shells. And I'm also going to add, I was chopping some onion. So I'm going to add the onion onion shells and the onion ends, and even these tiny pieces of garlic that I just don't want to fool with because they're just too tiny. So I'll put them all in here. And then, you know, when I get a goodly bag full or when I need some vegetable stock, I just pull this out of the freezer, add whatever I might need to it, and make more stock or broth. If you want to know more about that, come to that class. So I'm going to check my oil and chop my garlic. Does anybody have a favorite way of dispensing with garlic, mincing garlic, or making it, chopping it very small. Do you have any tricks that you want to share about that? Because I've just sort of learned my own way over the years, and I don't know that it's the most efficient way.
I don't know if this is any more nutritional or not, but I just buy the jar at Walmart or HEB that's already chopped up.
Yeah,
Big jars, and I just scoop out of there, and I don't have to worry about.
well, that's true. Yeah, yeah. Anybody else? Anybody else use the jarred garlic?
Well,
I chop it like you.
I usually bake my garlic. I like to bake my garlic.
You like to bake it?
Yes. I
Bake-
like to make a spread out of it.
You cut out a little bit, so I missed an important word in there. You like to,
I like to make spreads, like put it on toast,
okay. So you,
biscuits, whatever.
so
Mhm.
you roast it, the whole head in something with a little oil drizzled over it. Yeah, that's delicious.
Yeah.
So some people like to use garlic presses. It just depends upon what you're using it for and how much, that's fine too, especially if it's called for minced garlic. So what we've got here is onion, and it calls for 2 onions diced. So I used the onions that I had on hand. I really didn't have any yellow onions. I seem to really enjoy sweet onions no matter what, even though the yellow onions are good cooking onions. I don't always have them on hand. So when I saw that said 2 cooking onions, I just took one of my very large sweet onions and I'm using that. And I'm just dicing it with my pretty sharp knife here, and I can make pretty quick work of it. Yeah, I keep a lot of the sweet onions on hand because red onions and some other onions really stay with me a lot. They don't make me feel bad, but I think they make me smell really badly. So, so the sweet onions seem to be better that way, and I just tend to move toward those a little bit. So I'm finished. So I took one of those very large ones in place of what I would have considered 2 smaller cooking onions. And I found the flavor to be very good. Cooking onions would be great. Leeks would be fine, I think, as well. Be a milder onion taste if you wanted to use those. We don't have to be too fussy. So my oil and my butter is now melted together. I'm just going to add that in and let it start to simmer a while, cook a little bit. Heat up just a little. And then I'm going to just show you quickly my little brush. We talked about cleaning mushrooms in a class yesterday, and I wanted to ask you, I asked that group, how do you clean your mushrooms? So I will throw that question out to you. How do you clean your mushrooms?
Brush.
Something like this?
No, I have a little mushroom brush.
You have a little mushroom brush, okay.
It's round and it has a wooden top.
Oh, nice. Who's saying this? That's you, Chris?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a specific mushroom brush that's rounded and might work a little better than this. This is what I've had for a long time. So anybody else?
I run them underwater and rub on them a little bit.
Okay. Yep. It's a way to do it. I know I've been in that when I'm in a hurry, I've done that. Purists say we should not really make our mushrooms wet because they do retain a lot of water, and that makes perfect sense to me. So the way that we are kind of taught to do this correctly is to brush them. The soil they're grown in, if they're purchased through at the grocery store, has been sterilized. And so if we brush that soil off or use a damp paper towel, that should be sufficient for cleaning our mushrooms.
I do have one question. With the mushrooms that are pre-sliced in the grocery store, are they already cleaned, or do we need to clean those?
No, they're already clean.
All right.
I have not ever really bothered with cleaning those. How about anybody else? That's my take. Anybody else have a different take on that? They'd be hard to clean the proper way, properly. Yeah, they're pretty well cleaned. I was thinking, I know someone who works in a mushroom, who's a manager at a mushroom plant. It might be really interesting to have him come and talk about how they grow mushrooms and how they clean them and things someday.
That
So,
would be cool.
yeah, that would be cool. Okay, I'll put that on the list. My gosh, my list is getting very long. So anyway, this particular soup recipe calls for fresh brown mushrooms, but I have to tell you, I was at the grocery outlet. They had half pounds of mushrooms for 89 cents. And so white mushrooms it is, and it tasted just as well. And then we have, for our fresh herb for this soup, we're using dried thyme. So I went out in my garden. My thyme plant was coming back here this spring, and I was stripping thyme this morning. Not my favorite thing to do. Does anybody else strip thyme and have a good, easy shortcut for that? As some of it you can just strip right off, and then some of those other stems are not real woody. Frankly, I just chop those in, the not so woody ones. So it's not an
I
exact.
usually let it dry first. It's easier when it's dry.
Yeah, and then the difference for me with that is just, and it doesn't matter, is just to know that when it dries, it gets smaller, so you're adding to the quantity, if that makes sense. So you don't have quite as much of the a tablespoon of the really fresh stuff is going to measure way less after it's been dried even a little bit. I noticed that overnight because I left some on the counter last night. So I needed to add, and I added some to it anyway, but yeah, it measures.
Can I ask a question about the herbs?
Uh-huh.
I have seen, I'm from Florida,
Uh-huh.
and of course during the summer it gets extremely hot.
Yeah.
The only herbs I've ever been able to grow kind of at different seasons is rosemary and basil. Everything else cannot take the heat.
Yeah.
Does anyone else that have a real hot climate have issues like that?
Well, that's a great question. Go ahead, speak up on that one.
I'm in Mississippi. I have the same problem.
Yeah, it is hard. And there's, get a little water here. You can do some, I have only a similar kind of experience here with cilantro, because cilantro is such a cool weather crop. So the way that I at least get an extended season out of that is to grow it in a pretty shady area close to my house. So one where at least the temperature stays a little cooler than the rest of the area. But it's so I don't know whether some of your herbs could possibly survive, but it does get so hot in Florida.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know. I only have like one tree, and it, especially I've only been able to grow the basil and the rosemary in pots on the patio, and it only on one side of the patio. The other side gets too much sun.
Yes. Yes. Well,
Can't you grow it? Can you grow it indoors? I use a grow light, and I grow a lot of stuff year round because I'm in Chicago, but I grow a lot of herbs year round indoors under my grow light.
Good suggestion. So Chris, just say another minute about that with respect to what your setup looks like. So a grow light, you have hanging light. Is it hanging?
Yes.
And then do you just have a dedicated table, or do you put it in a cupboard, or not a cupboard, but a stand?
No, I have it's a shelving unit, and I just have them on two different shelves.
Mm-hmm.
And I do it with jars of water and pebbles. I forget what method that's called, but you put the pebbles in there, and then you just drop the seeds on, and I grow lettuce year round and basil, and there's some things that don't do well, like dill will grow for a while, and then I grow some in pots too.
So you have some that's soilless, using the stones and the water, and then you have some that you grow in soil. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. Yes.
And just one more question: are you able to grow basil successfully inside?
Oh yes, that grows really well in the water.
Okay. You just put the seeds on the stones and in the water then? Or
Yep.
in, yeah, okay.
That's it. And it grows, yes, it grows really well. Basil does. There's some I have trouble with, like sage. Rosemary does really well. That's in dirt. The sage was in dirt. The thyme was in dirt. Oregano is in dirt.
Are the pebbles just regular pebbles or are they certain kind of pebbles?
There are certain kind of pebbles. They're clay. I bought mine on Amazon, but they're clay. They're just round clay, so they're very porous. And then you have a mesh hanging container that you put in the jar, and you put the pebbles in the mesh container. And then you fill it up with water, and you have to make sure you feed them. I learned that the hard way.
Oh, yes.
You have to put feed in there, and you just fill it, just so that the pebbles become wet, and then you drop the seeds on top.
Nice. Really, I'm going to try that. That's a great idea, Chris. And thanks. If there's anything else that you can think of that would be helpful to the group, Chris, would you put that in the chat, please? That would be a great share.
I need to find out what that's called. Maybe I can look it up on my phone.
Okay. Thank
Like
you.
a hydroponic?
Yeah, but there's a name for the jars and the clay pebbles.
All right, so I'm going to just keep going because I wanted to show you the other soups that I have. I just want you to know that, so my onions are soft now, and I'm going to add the garlic and let that go a little while. I realized I'm still sharing my screen, which I was going to stop doing so you could see more. Is it hard for you to really see me in the kitchen when I'm sharing my screen? Really hard. Okay, thank you for that. So
There's a way to make you the focus and put the presentation down in the small box, but I just did it I just poked around, so I can't tell you how I did it. So.
Yeah, so Joe, could you help out with that, help people get on the right view for seeing me and the presentation maybe down in the bottom would be great. I don't know if you could give a hand with that. And then we are looking here at pureed soups next. So these are vegetables that are simmered in stock or water in general, and then pureed. And lots of times if we use starchy vegetables, then they are the primary ingredient. So I made a carrot puree or carrot soup the other day, and that would be considered a starchy kind of vegetable, semi-starchy. Potatoes would be starchy and so on. But when you use non-starchy ingredients, non-starchy vegetables, then you want to add some kind of a starchy component like potatoes or rice. So that's just in general the definition or the approach to making a pureed soup. And a pureed soup may or may not contain milk or cream, so they taste just as good if you do not want to add dairy and you want to keep your calorie level lower. So this one is with cream, and this one is really good. I made this a few months ago testing recipes, smoked Gouda and broccoli soup. How many of you have a cream of broccoli soup that you've already made or tried? Anybody have a favorite? Anybody interested in cream of broccoli?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, me too.
So I've heard a lot of people say, I love Panera's cream of, isn't it Panera that makes a cream of broccoli soup that everybody likes? This one is very good, I think. And can you see the recipe? If I up it just a little bit. By the way, you'll be getting all of these recipes. You always do get recipes from me after the class so that you can recreate them. So we're looking at taking 1.5 pounds of broccoli and just taking some of that broccoli. Let me see, we take about 1.5 cups of it and just break off tiny florets that we're going to add into the soup at the very end. So our soup is essentially cream based. It's creamed, but you will have some broccoli florets in there so you have some bite. If you don't want that, if you just want a purely pureed soup, you do not need to add those florets. And what we're going to do with this recipe is saute the onion and then add the garlic. And here's where we start with the roux. Because we have our oil in there, we're going to add flour and also some paprika. And that will coat the onion and melt, or the flour will be blended in. And then we add the broth and the chopped broccoli. As we're taking the florets, those florets for decoration have been set aside. The rest of the broccoli has been rough chopped. Doesn't matter what it looks like, we're going to be blending it. So we then simmer that for about 8 to 10 minutes until the broccoli is soft. Bring it to a boil first and then bring it back to simmer for about 8 to 10 minutes. If you want to, you can make some croutons out of rye bread. It goes really nicely. You toss the rye bread cubes with some olive oil in a large skillet and just cook them until they're brown and crisp. Or you can throw them in the oven. I make mine in the oven a lot. So time out here. What's going on in this soup is that we have now cooked our garlic until it's fragrant. Now we're going to add the mushrooms. So there's all my 1.5 pounds of chopped mushrooms. I'm going to throw them in my soup pot here. One escaped. It wasn't bad. Giving this a good stir until, just to get everything damp, and then I'll come back to the other soup recipe. All right, so we are going to bake those, or skillet fry those croutons and set them aside. And when the broccoli is tender, after we've had it in the broth that we added, which could be either a vegetarian broth or 4 cups of low sodium chicken broth. So you can make it either way. Then we're going to blend it. So you can use an immersion blender. This is an immersion blender. I find an immersion blender very handy for pieces of vegetables that are smaller, manageable if I want to blend right in the pot. You have to make sure that this part of the blender, the blade, is under the surface of the soup, or otherwise you're going to get splashes all over your kitchen and all over yourself. Take it from me, I know this. So you use this to blend your vegetables. With the cream of broccoli soup and with other soups that I've made that have large chunks in them, I find it easier just to take batches of that and put it into my blender at a time and do it in my big blender, and then pour it back into the soup pot or into another soup pot when I've had it all blended. If the soup calls for you to just blend part of it to make it creamier, like if you have a soup that has beans in it, beans are often used in place of cream to thicken a soup, and you can just use your immersion blender down in your soup pot to blend some of those beans. So you have a lot of chunky stuff still left in your soup, but now you've blended some and made your soup base more creamy. So that's where an immersion blender comes into play. So with that broccoli soup, you've blended it, and now you're going to add some other ingredients. You put your soup back in your pot and you put it on a very low heat, and now you're going to add the smoked Gouda cheese. And I do recommend using the smoked Gouda. Obviously, you can use any kind of cheese you want and it would be delicious, but the smoked Gouda it's just different, and it tastes really good just by changing out the cheese. And you're going to add a little bit of white wine vinegar. This is just enough to do what we call brighten the soup a little bit, and then some salt and pepper. So that is all that there is to it, and we serve it with croutons on top. What do you think about that recipe?
Sounds
Sounds
great.
really good.
Try that one. I thought that one was a little bit different. a little bit different, and I really enjoyed it.
I like the bread in there. What's the bread for?
It's really just a garnish. You know, we can make these soups much more exciting. Like this carrot ginger soup doesn't do any, this picture doesn't do a whole lot for me. And I wanted to point that out to you. So that's kind of why I put that up there. A regular vegetable puree soup can be just a very nice, light, tasty thing that you say, oh, that's really good. You might have a little cup of it, but you might not find it interesting enough to eat a large bowl of it. So you might consider how you can use other herbs in that, sprinkling chives on top or parsley, depending upon the soup, how you might add croutons or drizzle some kind of, sometimes people drizzle basil on the top of a cream soup, depending upon what it is. There's lots of ways to dress up a very basic pureed soup and make it even look more appetizing. I don't think this one looks like it's all that appetizing, but it is tasty. And so this carrot ginger soup has a lot of carrots in it. Onions, leeks, celery. Ginger is the different ingredient here. And I used my freshly made vegetable broth in this soup. We're adding garlic as well. And the only dairy in here is some whole yogurt stirred in at the end, a 1/4 cup. You could, and I did, taste this without the yogurt, it would be fine. The other thing I did in this recipe was tried it with some curry powder, yellow curry powder. That changes the taste. Another spice that would change the taste pleasantly would be to add a little bit of nutmeg in. So you can really start with your basic carrot soup and see what you like about that. And then here's what I do as a test. I might take just a little cup of that soup and stir in a little bit of that other spice or herb and then taste it again and see whether I like that flavor profile better. And if I do, then I convert the whole kettle of soup over. If I don't, I leave it as is, or I try something else. So that's just something to think about. I know that when I get a bland soup, I think, well, what am I going to do to fix this? Because I'm not going to eat this soup if I don't look in the refrigerator and say, that's not so great. So my mushrooms, it's 1:12. Okay. See how we're doing here. Timing is always the issue. So we're doing pretty well with that. Mushrooms are cooking down. So let's look a little more closely at this carrot soup recipe. By now, the steps are getting familiar. We're going to heat the oil. This says vegetable oil. I always say use olive oil or use avocado oil. 2 good omega-3 fatty acid oils. Vegetable oil is that inexpensive vegetable oil we have in the grocery store. Doesn't really have high quality fats in it. So if you can, try to use either of those other 2 oils and heat that up in the pot and add the onions, the leeks, celery, ginger, garlic, and a little bit of salt. And then stir it and cover it a little bit. Go ahead, Diane.
What is the difference between the leeks and the onions? I thought they were pretty similar.
Well, you're right. They're both onions. Let me just get something here.
Okay.
I like to have options. So for really mild onions. And this is what I have left of a bunch of 3 leeks. So I have this left over, and I was thinking about actually using it in this mushroom soup, but then I just decided to go with my onion. But it's just nice to have a variation. But but know that they can be substituted too interchangeably. That's nice to have that flexibility too.
Okay.
And if you are you familiar with have you used leeks at all?
Yes.
Diane, have you used?
No, I have not. Mm-mm.
So
I was
leeks,
just reading a little note. No,
leeks look like gigantic spring onions. or
I've seen
star-
them, but I haven't used them a lot.
The part that you don't use is the dark green part. So you
The
just,
dark green.
yes. And what I do with that dark green part is I wash it all off and I put it in my bag in the-
Okay.
for my vegetable stock.
Now, do you still peel them the same way you peel the smaller onions, or do they do the you peel?
They
Okay.
really don't need peeled. All you have to do is cut the end off, the root end.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You keep that too for stock and then wash it really well. They tend to get sandy in between the layers. So you can
Okay.
just take a slice down the side and pull them open a little bit and rinse that out. They clean really easily though.
Okay.
All right. So someday maybe we'll do a little closer look at leeks. So you're going to sweat all of those things we put into the oil for about 8 to 10 minutes, stir in a little salt, and then add your carrots. So this calls for quite a few carrots. I think it's a few pounds. Yeah, 1.75 pounds of carrots that you have peeled, and then it says slice it 1/4 inch thick. What I did was, since size doesn't matter, we're pureeing this. I got my mini food processor out and chopped those up and threw them in the mini food processor. They were done in minutes. So no need to just spend all that time cutting 1/4 inch thick slices. You can make that go much faster. So you're adding in the carrots, adding in the vegetable broth, and then some orange juice, which gives it enhances the sweetness of the carrots. And especially good if your carrots aren't so sweet. Sometimes you get a really nice sweet batch of carrots, and that's great. Sometimes they are a little tasteless, so the orange juice can help bring that up a little bit. If your carrots are really dull, have no sweetness to them, you might even consider adding a pinch of sugar, just for that reason, because otherwise they could be kind of bland.
Or maple syrup?
Oh, yep, that'd be fine. Yeah. I was thinking that this soup would also do really well with coconut milk. I think it would be tasty because you're adding ginger in this. So this could be a creamy soup with coconut milk and enhanced by that ginger. You could garnish it with cilantro. Should be very tasty. So then after that is all cooked, after about 20 minutes, might take even less because your carrots might be smaller. You take it off and start to puree it in the blender again. And look at this point here. Fill the jar no more than half full, and make sure the lid on your blender is vented. You don't want your blender to build up heat and blow the top off, right? So make sure you're vented a little bit. You usually have a little hole in that plastic cap at the top. Turn it so it's open, and then put a folded kitchen towel over the top of your blender, just in case. That way I can keep everything in, okay? And you don't get any heat splashes if some accident does happen. Then put your soup back into a clean pan, and then you can add the yogurt, or you could add your coconut milk at this point. You can add a teaspoon of lime juice too right now, again, to brighten the taste of that. And then just season it according to your taste. So carrot soup, not one that we often think about. And it's just an example of one of many kinds of vegetables you could use in a soup. So just change out the vegetable, try other things, try other vegetables using the same recipe, same process. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is add this. I think this is what really makes the soup good. Now, this is calling for 1/3 of a cup of any kind of wine. And so I'm going to use what I have in the refrigerator, which is a Chardonnay, a dry white wine, 1/3 of a cup, half of a cup. Getting down to make sure that I'm looking at the measurement here. And I'm going to add this. And I'm going to crank up the heat, because all the way to the top, because I want this to boil away pretty quickly, or boil down. I'm going to add flour after this. And yesterday I rushed it a little bit. It all turned out okay. But what happens when there is too much liquid in there? Remember what I said about the flour? If you put it in liquid, it can get lumpy. So I had a little bit of an issue with that. But it went away. It was fine. But I'm going to let it get a little drier now. So I'm going to take a deep breath here for a second. Take a sip of water. And Joe, I just wanted to ask you if there's anything we should be talking about that showed up in the chat.
There's nothing as such as for now.
Okay.
But I was seeing a message from Nelda regarding she can't see the view.
About the view?
Right. But I am trying to convey the thing to her that there is a option that's on the top right corner.
Okay.
Can you please ask her on which device she is?
Okay, the top right corner is the device. So are you able to?
There is no view like that on mine on the desktop, but like I told everybody else on that I found these two little marks on your side of the video on the left side. And if you just go to that, it makes a line that moves it smaller or bigger and moves the other one either smaller or bigger. And that's what I was trying to tell you, Joe.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that with everybody, Nelda. Is that helpful? Did everybody see that? Does that give you a little bit of assistance with this?
Yes, it makes the recipe bigger or smaller then. And you can make you bigger or smaller.
So you can adjust it. That's great. That's what we want everybody to be able to do. So if you're having trouble with that and you want to even stay on after the class to talk more about it, we can do that and get there. That would be the ideal thing for you to be able to see that way. So that brings us to kind of the end. I had some other soups in there, I thought. Okay, well, I do. And let's just go. I think I might have had it down here at the end. So I'm going to send you this one because I love this soup.
Oh, cool.
This is a creamy corn soup. Super easy to make. And what I have labeled beside it on my recipe file, because I have this printed out in my book, is we love this. And I write that when my husband and I really like a recipe. And so it uses the fresh corn of the season. So get ready for it. Use a nice white sweet corn or a nice bicolor or yellow sweet corn with tender kernels is good. Although you are blending this soup. And it's very easy. You're removing the corn from the cob. Maybe we'll come back and do that as well at some point, actually show how to do this kind of a soup. But you're using the paring knife, you're cutting away from you stand the ear up in a bowl and you just slice on down through close to the cob and remove the kernels from about eight ears of corn. And then what you're going to do is melt the butter in a large pan over medium heat until the butter starts to foam, and then add some chipotle peppers. Anybody use chipotle peppers?
Yes.
Yes, and these are in adobo sauce. So who said yes? Was that you, Chris?
Yeah. Oh, my mouth is watering.
So anybody else have experience with adobo peppers or chipotle peppers in adobo sauce?
I use it in chili sometimes.
Okay, and what do you know about, what can you tell us? What's your best advice about those?
You get the can and you can't use the whole thing. So use very sparingly because they are strong, and I think I like hot, so they don't seem hot to me, but a lot of people say they're hot. Okay. So I end up putting, what I need in the recipe, and then I freeze the rest in a Ziploc bag.
That's exactly what I would have said, Jeannie, too. The same thing. The can goes a long way. I have the same can of adobo chili peppers in my freezer for the last, I'm embarrassed to say, but they are still good, but it's well over a year. And I just get out a little piece and use a little piece of it because, yes, you really have to decide whether how hot it is for you. For Jeannie, it's not so bad. For me, a little goes a long way.
Yeah,
so
I try to, when I put it in a Ziploc bag, I put it all down the bottom, and then I try to roll the bag to make it like a long tube. So like you said, you can take it out of the freezer and you can break a piece off.
Yes, that's a great idea. That's a good suggestion because you're not really you don't want to take the sauce off of the pepper. You're using the sauce and the pepper. they kind of mingle together. So it's good to do that, to have just a piece that you can lop off so that you can get a half teaspoon of minced chipotle peppers. So you're going to put
It's best to buy them in a can. So that's the way to purchase
yes,
them.
because they're
Okay.
in adobo sauce, and that's
Okay.
and while we're going to go back to this recipe, but I'm putting 6 tablespoons of flour now into my mushroom soup, which is mostly dry, on top of my mushrooms. And I'm just going to blend that in now until I don't see any more white. I'll show that to you in a minute.
Could you use cornstarch?
Yeah, it might be slightly the thickness, the consistency thickness. Cornstarch thickens things a little bit differently, but yeah, you could. So that's what it looks like. All the flours disappeared, and now I'm going to put in the broth. And this is the chicken stock that I made, according to the recipe that we've talked about. This does have vegetables in it. Your chicken stock can just be with bones, but I also added vegetables. So this will be a very flavorful broth in here.
You said you had your recipes somewhere. Where can?
Yep, you're going to get those recipes. Oh, and you know what I did? I told you, I knew I'd forget something while I was talking and trying to do everything at once. I am going to put this couple of teaspoons of thyme in here. I should have cooked those a couple teaspoons of thyme in with the mushrooms, but I'm going to put it in now with the broth and it'll be fine. But it's nice to put it in when you're sauteing the mushrooms because it releases in the oil, it releases the fat soluble flavors and things that are in that thyme. So it will taste fine here as well. But that's the culinary way. So we'll let that come to a little bit of a boil and we'll come back to our corn recipe. We're going to do those, put those chipotles, a little bit of salt and pepper, and some of the scallions in there and stir it in the butter and soften that a little bit. Takes about 3 minutes. Then add in the corn kernels and the rest of the salt and the milk and the water that we have up here. So this does have milk in it and water, half and half. You could use any kind of milk that you want. So any of those milks that we talked about before would be really just fine and very tasty. And you're going to cook this for about 15 minutes. And then you're going to put this soup through a fine mesh strainer. So you really want to strain out the solids. One thing I don't think I mentioned is that we are going to reserve, I think we say we reserve a half cup of the corn kernels. We're going to stir those in at the end. But we cook the rest of the corn and we strain the soup through a strainer. And after we blend it. So we blend the soup, we put it through a strainer. And put it back into the bowl or put it back into the pot and then stir in the corn kernels and season it again and top it with scallions. That would be what the rest of the scallions are being used for, garnish.
Deb, going back to the mushroom soup, for the flour, could we substitute any other kind of flour?
Yes, I think that you could substitute a gluten-free flour. The blends that they sell at the store that have potato starch or tapioca starch or rice starch in them, they would all be decent thickeners, as would cornstarch. I mean, you'd be fine if you didn't want to use flour, yeah.
I guess almond flour or coconut flour wouldn't do it.
I don't think they would really, they're not really starchy, so they would not really thicken as much, I don't think. So now we've got, can you kind of see that? I know it's sort of hard. It's pretty thick right now. And it's essentially finished. I'm going to stir in some half and half now. Again, you can stir in any kind of cream that you would like. I'm going to do the real thing because I think
see on this corn soup, it says to refrigerate it. Is it a cold soup or a warm hot soup?
It can go either way.
Okay.
So I'm just putting all that half and half in there. Since my husband's at the store picking up another container. And just going to do with my spoon. Oh, that looks delicious. So I'm going to get a little bit of a ladle here. The last thing is, this calls for beef bouillon in the soup, and I'm going to taste this because I didn't put it in this time. It calls for 2 beef bouillon cubes. And I put in better than bouillon last time. I just forgot to stick it in this time. I put a little, like a tablespoon or teaspoon in of that. And it just beefs up the stock a little bit, but let me just taste it. Yeah, I'll probably stir some of that in for a little more salt and beefy flavor. I didn't salt this really much, so it's going to be okay for me to add some of that into the soup and just blend it in. And that, now where are we here? And that kind of brings us to the end, but here's what the soup looks like when it's all been finished. And I have to say, I just think it is the best cream of mushroom soup that I've had. And I like it having the whole mushrooms in. Could you blend it? Yeah, you could. You could blend it, and so it would be a smooth soup if that's what you want. I like the chew value a little bit. So I want to thank you. Thank you for coming
Thank
today.
you very much. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Thank
Enjoy.
you very much.
you're very
Thank you so
welcome.
very much.
I hope that you will come to more classes. Please invite your friends and enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Thank you, Deb. Bye bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye, Joe. Thank you.